Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day-to-day, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing a young man named Austin Harrouff, who was dubbed by the media as the face-eating frat boy. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes more than one a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. Now, before we get into this case, I need to first say a big thank you to Ana Luisa Jewelry for partnering with me on today's video. If you've been here a while, you've heard me sing the praises of Ana Luisa Jewelry. They are a jewelry company. That creates high quality pieces at affordable prices. It is beautiful jewelry that doesn't tarnish easily, like it's long lasting because it doesn't tarnish easily. It stays super shiny and beautiful jewelry pieces that you'll love today and you'll love tomorrow, but they're affordable so they don't break the bank, which is personally very important to me. I love Ana Luisa Jewelry, and speaking of love, because Valentine's Day is what? Tomorrow? How did that happen so quickly? How is it already February 14th? I don't know. But this Valentine's Day season, I say that the most important thing you can do is take care of the person that you should love most, yourself. Because really, at the end of the day, you're the one who's taking care of you, right? You're the one looking out for yourself. And let's be real, you're probably the one taking care of and looking out for a lot of other people too. Am I right? I bet I'm right. Ana Luisa's pieces are an excellent way to treat yourself and elevate your everyday. And plus, the best thing is they have speedy shipping all over the world. Now, I got a couple of pieces that I'm going to show you right now to kind of give you an idea of something that you could, look for yourself. Maybe somebody else, but for yourself. And bro, these are so cute. Let me show you. It's funny, I'm removing my earrings to show you my new earrings, and the earrings I'm removing are also Ana Luisa. All right, so the first pair I have to show you are the Spencer Dark Tortoise. I'm sure you can't see it now with my dark hair, but look at how stunning these are. Aren't these beautiful? I feel like they're very different than anything else I've gotten from Ana Luisa. They're kind of branching out and doing some new styles, and I am obsessed with these. And let me show you them with another pair because I have two holes. I want to put a little pair that I got, and oh my god, just wait. Okay, the next ones I got are the Harpers. I think these might be my favorite ones. I don't want to jump to the conclusions. Jump to any conclusions, but I love the, these are going to be my new second hole earring for sure, like my everyday, because I love them. And I feel like they look super cute with these Spencers. Now, these next ones I have here are the Hannah Lees in silver. You may recognize these because I actually do have these in gold as well, but I wanted to pick them up in silver too, so I could do kind of a mixed metals thing, maybe put both swords on one side, both little dangles on the other side, or switch, swatch, snip, snap, snip, snap. And I thought that they'd be really beautiful, and I did not own them in silver, so now I do. Now, if you're a sword lover like me, but you like something a little daintier, may I present to you the Bonds. Oh, I love these. So I'm actually going to keep these two on for the rest of the video because I feel like they just look super cute together, and I'm kind of in more of a dainty mood. I don't know who I am. Who is she? I don't know, but I love these, and I think you would love these too. So, great news. Ana Luisa is actually having one of their best sales of the entire year just for Valentine's Day, and it's where if you buy one piece, you get the second piece for 50% off. I feel like that's such a good deal. So maybe get yourself one, get one for your best friend, or really you could just get yourself two items because you deserve it. So if all of that sounds as good to you as it does to me, make sure to click the link in the top of my description box so Ana Luisa knows that it's me who sent you to their website. It really helps me, it really helps my channel, and take advantage of one of the best deals of the year by getting buy one, get one 50% off on your new favorite adorable piece of jewelry today. And now I just want to say another thank you to Ana Luisa Jewelry for sponsoring today's video, and another thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock, don't ever change. Alright, now that I'm done spreading the good word of Ana Luisa Jewelry, we can get into this video. This is a video on a case that I had heard of before. It's one that I saw a video on years ago or listened to a podcast on years ago. And it's one that I was like, you know what, I'm going to cover one day. And finally the day had come where I was like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look into it. And I kind of looked on YouTube to see how many videos there were, which there are, it is a reported case. But what I noticed, which I found to be interesting, is a lot of the cases that I saw, not the cases, a lot of the videos I saw, a lot of the podcasts I saw, were kind of short, which surprised me because when I started looking into this case, there was so much information. Okay, so much. Like, this to me could be a several-parter. Okay, this was almost a two-parter. I was able to get it into one video, so you're not gonna have to wait for part two, but it's the type of one that I could have done 2 or 3 parts on. easily if I wanted to stretch it out in that way, because there's just so much. Just Austin's like mental health evaluation alone had so much information. This case is just insane, dude. So today I'm going to tell you all about this crazy case. I read all the things so you do not have to. And at the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you kind of have it kicking around in your brain while we go through this case. And I actually have a couple of questions. The first is, what do you think was going on with Austin at the time that he committed this crime? Because there are different thoughts on what was going on here. Do you believe that he was suffering from a mental break at the time that he committed his murders? Because he killed 2 people, which we're going to get into. We're going to get into that at length, who these people were, because that's really the most important thing here. But I want to know, do you think he was suffering from a psychotic break? Do you think that he was just kind of evil? Do you think this was due to drug use? Or do you think that perhaps this was a mental break that was brought on by his continued drug use? So something that he would still be responsible for because he caused his own downfall, sort of. And with that said, the second question is, do you believe that his sentence was just? Have that all kicking around in your brain and let me know all your thoughts in the comments below after I give you all the information. And now with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of Austin Harrouff, the face-eating frat boy. So our story begins on August 15th, 2016, and this is when police are responding to a 911 call that was put in by a man named Jeff Fisher. This man, Jeff, was on the other line, as one is when they're making a call, and he was out of breath and he was frantic, and he was telling police that he needed help immediately. He said that he had been in his home when he heard screaming, so he went outside and he saw that his neighbor across the street, which was a woman, her name was Mishcon, she was laying in a pool of her blood unresponsive, and there was a young man who was in the garage with her who had essentially beat her to unconsciousness, is what he believed. He says that he went over to try to help, and when he did, this guy who was Austin, attacked him as well, and he freaked out and he ran home. And he said that that Michelle needed medical assistance, but also that he needed medical assistance because he had been stabbed 3 times. In the head, in the back, and in the neck. So police arrived to the home located on Southeast Kokomo Lane, just north of Palm Beach County in Florida. And when they arrived, they see 2 men in front of an open garage. One man is 59-year-old John Stevens III, while another man, and this is Austin Harrouff, has himself, his body wrapped around this other man's body, okay? And like an MMA holder, a bear hug. And he is ripping pieces of John's face off with his teeth. So police tell Austin to get off John, right? But he doesn't respond at all. They shoot him with a taser gun. Nothing. They sick a dog on him. Nothing. No response. It took several officers using all of their strength to pry Austin off of John Stevens. I cannot even imagine what coming up on this scene must have been like. It sounds horrifying. It sounds like something that you can't even make up. It sounds like a horror movie, but just worse. It gives me all of the icks, right? And it was real. It did happen. And at the end of this attack, John and Michelle were dead. They had both been brutally beaten to death and stabbed to death, okay? They went through hell. And Austin, their murderer, was asking the police and begging for help, saying that he ate something that made him sick. And when they asked him what he ate, he said humans. So that's a lot, right? And that's just the synopsis. That's just the toe dip into this case. There's so much to cover. But before we do, I first want to talk about who John was and who Michelle was, and then go into who Austin was. And then we'll get into what happened that night specifically, all of the details, and the aftermath of these murders. So I want to start by talking about John and Michelle, and I'm going to start with John. John was the son of a former pro baseball player, actually, and he was a South Florida native, and he had the mindset of why would anyone want to live anywhere other than here? He loved where he lived. He loved his life. He had been in Iraq, over there in the military, doing military things, and once he was done serving his time, is that how you say it? I don't know. Once he was done being in the military and came home, he fulfilled his dream of buying a boat. He was one of those people who really wanted to buy a boat, so he came home and he bought that boat, and he used it all the time, creating memories on it. He took his son out there, who was also named John. He was John the Fourth, and they would go out on the boat and go fishing and just spend a lot of time creating memories together. This is something he went on to do with his wife, Michelle, as well. Whenever they weren't at home, they were fishing because they were both retired. John had worked as a landscaper. I think he had actually had 2 businesses as like landscaping businesses, but then he was retired, and Michelle had worked in finance. So now that they were no longer working, they spent a ton of time fishing. This was something John did a lot as a boy, so it's something like fishing was something John did a lot as a boy, so it's something that John wanted to bring forward with him into his adult life as well. It was something that was important to him, and that's why he bought the boat. And well, I'm sure he bought the boat for other reasons too, but speaking of the boat, this part got my heart a little bit. John's son, John IV, actually went on to buy this boat after his father died, which I was wondering like why he had to buy it. I don't know who had it. That part was fuzzy on me, but it said that he bought this boat so that he could go on it and keep it in the family, you know, and also be able to take his daughter on it. A daughter who he said he wanted to raised to be like his father. He wanted her to be patient. He wanted her to be kind. He wanted her to appreciate the little things in life like nature and just be a good person who cared about other people and how they felt, which I thought was very sweet because that's how he saw his father. And speaking of his daughter, because this part broke my heart a little bit, John IV said that dealing with what happened to his father was really hard for him, which would be, you know, hard for anybody, especially with the way that this happened. But it was especially hard because he and his family had had big plans. They had been really excited to introduce his father to his 3-month-old daughter. She was going to be having a baptism 2 weeks after John was killed, and, you know, so she didn't get to meet him. And it was hard for him because he knew how excited his dad was to be a grandfather, and how excited he was to meet the baby, and he didn't get to. I mean, even when Stephen IV posted like a sonogram on Facebook, like, look at my new baby, or whatever he posted with it, his father commented on it, was like, oh, I can't wait until she's fully baked so I can hold her and smush her and love her, you know, which I thought was just funny, the way he said that like shows that he has a little bit of a sense of humor, and he never got to meet her and hold her and love her. John IV has said he has no idea how he's going to tell his daughter and his stepson that they don't have a grandfather, and like how he's going to tell them that he was killed in the way that he was. Like, how do you tell a child that? And he says that he has had a lot of people that were friends with John come out, like friends of his come out to try to fill that grandpa void and like be there for him, and that he's super grateful for all of them doing that, but that nothing can actually fill that void like their grandfather would. And I just thought that that little note that all of John's friends, so many of John's friends came out trying to like fill that void and be that for him and for his daughter. I think it just shows what a good person that John was, that people would go to bat for him like that. John was just said to be the type of person who always talked about the importance of kindness and hard work. And he was said to be a charitable guy who cared about other people and always just wanted people to be happy. He was an avid outdoorsman who just loved being outside and also loved conserving nature. His son said that back when the BP oil spill happened, do you remember that, when that happened? He said that his father cried because he was so hurt by what had happened. You know what I mean? Like, that just shows what a good-hearted person he was. And I have to imagine it was these qualities, these positive attributes in a person, in a man, that attracted his wife, Michelle, to him. Now, Michelle Mishcon was one of 5 children, and her father had actually once been the North Miami mayor. His name was Jeff, and this family had already experienced so much tragedy. This family has experienced too much tragedy for me. It makes me so sad because prior to Michelle being killed, her mother died. I guess her mother, her name was Patricia, was only 53 when she died of like a sudden heart attack, so nobody was prepared for it. It wasn't like she was sick and then like they had nothing leading up to her death to even get used to the idea at all. And this like wrecked her family. It like wrecked her father. Apparently that was like his person. He called her his partner in crime. So now he's left with no wife and they're left with no mother. Despite the tragedy that her family had endured, Michelle was still like a great person who came out on top of it. She was still super happy and she loved her life. She was said to be the type of person who was always laughing and making other people laugh. And she had a lot of friends and a big family who loved her and have suffered every day since she's been killed. It's actually so sad too, because Michelle's sister Jody later said to Austin, like once there was a trial and all that, that he had killed not only her sister, but her father as well, because after Michelle died, her father was like irreparably damaged. He never got better. He had already been in poor health, and after Michelle was gone, he just never got better. Like, he just got worse and worse because this man just lost and lost and lost. And I feel like that's the ripple effects of these things are something that I feel like isn't talked about a lot. And I mention that in a lot of videos. I always bring it up because it's not just the person, it's all the people that cared about this person that you're destroying when you do things like this. Michelle and John together sounded like, from everything I read, they just sounded so cute, dude. They sounded like they were really in love and like they were really partners with one another. Like there were these cards that they had written to each other, these cards and these notes that they had written to each other, and these cards and notes ended up being read at their memorial service. I'm doing good today. And in one of these, Michelle had written to John that she was so excited whenever she'd be coming home and she would see his truck in the driveway. She would just get giddy like a schoolgirl because she knew that she'd go inside and he would be there, which I was like, that's so cute. And then in one that John wrote to Michelle, he said to her, and I quote, "I'm so in love with you, Mish. I feel like a new person, and I hope this new life of ours will bring joy to us both." It's just so fucking sad, dude. Like, they had just celebrated their 19th wedding anniversary when they were killed. So John and Michelle had both been married before. Like, they'd been in previous relationships. But once they found each other in 1997, and this was at a financial firm where they both were working in Miami, that was it. It was like, bing, bang, boom. I like you. You like me. Let's get together. Yeah. So they did. They got together, and they built themselves a home near Jupiter in this house that was surrounded by golf courses next to the river. Their friends and neighbors described them as such generous, giving people. And one of their neighbors said that Michelle was just like the best person and that John was the most mild-mannered, sweet man you would ever meet. This friend, her name was Denise, by the way, she said that John and Michelle were just the type of people who would go out of their way to help other people. They would do whatever they could to do things for others just because they could. She said that on one occasion, they just like randomly invited a bunch of people over to their garage and made lobster tails for everyone just because they were the type of generous, giving people who would do something like that. She even said that they once took her elderly widowed father, hers, Denise's, under their wing until the day he died. And so when all of this happened, this woman just like asked, she's like, why would this man, Austin, why would he do something like this? Why would he take such wonderful people from this world? Like, she could not understand how this could happen. The two were just happy, right? They were in love. They liked going out on boats. They liked the idea that their adult children were going out into the world and making something of their lives. They liked driving around in their golf cart with their dog because freaking pure, beautiful, wonderful people. And they loved hanging out in what they called their garage mahal. This was the garage in their home, and they had sort of turned it into their sanctuary. It was furnished. It was like a little furnished outdoor hangout spot where they had set up a TV, a stereo, a bar, and couches. And they were just like magnets, man, attracting people to them anywhere and everywhere they went. So when this place was set up, this is where everyone in the community would come over to hang out and relax after a long day of work and just connect with one another. They were just the type of people who wanted to bring other people together, who wanted a safe space for everyone to get together. They had an open door policy on their garage, an open door that Austin walked through that night and killed them. Now, who was Austin Harrouff, their killer? At the time that Austin murdered John and Michelle Stevens, he was a 19-year-old Florida State University sophomore. He had no criminal record and had been very active in high school with wrestling and football playing. Like, his dream was to be a football player and he wanted to get scouted to play. But in the meantime, he was studying exercise science and was part of a fraternity, the Alpha Delta Phi fraternity at FSU. Austin was said to have come from like a good household. His parents did separate when he was just 13 years old, but he was still close with and had a relationship with both of them. He said that his father was a nice man, but sometimes had a bit of a temper. And he said that his mother was like a great mother. She was very, quote, motherly, whatever that means, and that she could be a little bit permissive at times. Growing up, Austin was a bit of a chubby kid, and he was said to have a bit of acne as well. And this made him really insecure and uncomfortable in his body and just made him not the happiest he could have been when he was growing up. So once he started high school, he actually started working out, getting really into fitness, playing sports and things like that, because he said he wanted to look cool and have a nice body, which, I mean, goals are goals. Go after what you're going to go after. But yeah, that's how, like, once you see what he looks like now, you'll be like, oh, like, clearly what he was doing was working, because he ended up being pretty fit. And I think all of these goals led into what he went on to do later with, like, playing sports and wanting to play football and things like that. And, you know what I'm saying. I hope. I don't know. What do you know? Austin also had speaking of like the working out thing, Austin also had a YouTube channel, which I thought was crazy. Like he had some fitness videos on there. And the channel is actually still up. His videos are up. Like you can go and you can watch them and it's super weird. It says that he joined in March of 2016 and he has some workout videos on there, but most of his videos are music videos by his handle, which was Austy Frosty. And he had an album that was entitled Devil in Disguise. And in his bio, it says, quote, "This, that fuck around music y'all been hearing about. I've got a psycho side and a normal side. I've lost my mind. Help me find it." And people cling on to that a bit because of like, because some people think he lost his mind here. I don't really look that far into that particular bio because it just sounds like something like a frat boy making like trap music might say, like a SoundCloud rapper might say, but that I just thought that was crazy that he actually had a YouTube channel and I could go and I could hear his voice and see how he talked and things like that before all of this happened. Anyway, speaking of Austin sort of losing his mind. So Austin started dabbling, like I think a lot of people do, in alcohol and weed when he was a teenager. It started as having a couple of drinks at a party and then turned into like parties every weekend and drinking a ton. And then it turned into blacking out. And it's at that point that he decided he was going to stop drinking. The same thing happened with weed. He would smoke weed a lot and then he started to get, quote, some weird feelings. So he stopped. He wanted to get his body clean. He was really into athletics and physical fitness and wanted, to get drafted to play football. So he didn't want to take anything, ingest anything into his body that would inhibit him from pursuing these goals. But obviously that changed because, I'm talking about it, right? In college, he started dabbling in a little more. In college, he started trying mushrooms, LSD, Molly, Xanax, Vyvanse, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. It's Vyvanse, and Adderall. And the latter two, he said he used to help him study. And on top of the substance abuse, he also reported that he started having some mental health issues around the college time as well. He started to suffer from sleep paralysis, which anytime I hear about sleep paralysis, I feel awful for people that have it, right? Like, I'm not saying I feel awful for Austin specifically, just speaking of sleep paralysis, it sounds absolutely terrifying. I've never had it, knock on wood. I don't have any wood around me. It sounds awful. And he said he suffered from that. He said that he also would feel like he had been abducted by aliens at night. And it was said that like some mental health issues did run in his family, that his father had depression and that his aunt, I believe it was, had electroshock therapy done on her. And it was believed that that was done for depression as well. He also reported that his mental health got worse as time went on. He said that he started having hallucinations in addition to all the other things that we discussed, and that as he got older, the hallucinations became more and more frequent. He started seeing monsters when he woke up, or demon-like figures, and while working at his job as a dental assistant, because he had a job as a dental assistant, he felt like he could, quote, manipulate the water that he used for sterilizing instruments at work, and also believed that the water was a source of power for him. So we took like a hard turn here into like, what the fuck is he talking about, right? He also believed that he could like bless this water, and then that would make the instruments used in the dental office sterile, which makes me very concerned that he wasn't sterilizing dental tools for people getting their teeth done, and that's disgusting. But he said at that point he also felt like he was special. It was when he started manipulating the water that he knew he was special, because no one could manipulate water like he did. It was at this point that he started believing that he was the next civil rights leader and started fasting like Gandhi. Like, he believed that he could unite anyone. He could solve any problem. Like, he had some issues, clearly, if this is all true. He felt like he could unite anyone and felt like he could literally do anything he put his mind to. And that's something that figuratively a lot of people say, but he literally thought he could. He felt like he had superpowers within him and thought he was like Jesus and wanted to wake up in the sunlight so he'd feel recharged by the light. And then in the days before the murders, he said that he was afraid a dark spirit was going to kill him in his sleep. He was also worried that these demons would kill his sister, and he was so afraid of the dark, like he associated the dark with evil and the light with like goodness, so he started dressing in light colored clothing. And that's why he was sleeping in the light, so he'd be recharged. He had like a lot going on. What is it that Stephanie Harlow says? Like, a hot fudge sundae with extra nuts. I 100% know that mental health issues are not something to joke about. When I said that, I wasn't trying to be like disrespectful to people with mental health issues, because your girl's got a few. Where's my microphone? Your girl's got a few, but sometimes when things are just like so intense and ridiculous, like what else can you do to get through the day? You know what I mean? Like, fuck. Anyways, in the weeks leading up to the murders, Austin was said to have had a strangely elevated mood. Like, he was filled with energy every day and was having feelings of grandiosity, and said that he didn't need to sleep. He also started engaging in more and more reckless behavior. He would start like walking in the middle of the street when there were cars because he believed deep down they would not hit him. And he would start like spending money he didn't have, like spending way more money than he would ever spend on anything, just for no reason. It was around this time that he also started getting more and more paranoid. He was really, really concerned with this dark spirit killing him or his family in their sleep. So he actually like moved rooms. He took his mattress and moved to another room in the house so he could be closer to everyone. And sometimes he would even sleep in his sister's room with her. Her name was Haley, I believe, and they were super, super close, and he was worried about her, so he would sleep in the room with her. He would also make sure to sleep closer to the family dog. The dog's name, was Hubble. So fucking cute. The dog's name was Hubble, and he would sleep next to Hubble so that Hubble could protect him. And then he started to get like a fixation on his dog. Like, this was a thing. He started to become very fixated with his dog and dogs in general. And then he started feeling like when he would hear dogs barking out in the street at night, like this was the sound of the dog's souls screaming for him specifically. And speaking of this dog thing, even the day of the murders, he went to the beach. He was hanging out at the beach, and he started running on the beach like a dog. He felt like he was half dog, half man, and started running on the beach. He said he was super fast as fuck boy, running on the beach as a half man, half dog. And he said he would see other dogs at the beach, and he thought they were very cool because they were like him. And he said he started to feel these dogs' fur attaching to his face, turning him into a dog. And this was the day that he murdered John and Michelle. So this now brings us to the night of the murders. So on the night of the murders, Austin was actually out to dinner at a restaurant called Duffy's, and he was there with his father and his father's girlfriend. And at the dinner table, he was drinking water, and he was drinking a lot of water. He said he was doing so because he believed that this water was water from the fountain of youth, and if he drank this water, he would actually regress and be young. So he's drinking so much water that it's noticeable. It's noticeable by his family, his father, his father's girlfriend, and even the waiter. It got to the point that the waiter and his father tried to convince him to have an alcoholic beverage to like relax him, but he wouldn't do it. So they're sitting there having hella water when all of a sudden Austin just gets up to leave the table. He said he did so because he felt like time was standing still and he was the Grim Reaper. He gets up and he leaves the table. His father thinking he's just going to the bathroom, but in reality, he just leaves the restaurant. After leaving the restaurant, Austin walked to his mother's house. And when he got to his mother's house, she had to stop him from eating cooking oil. Apparently, he took a bottle of cooking oil and poured it into a bowl with Parmesan cheese and just tried to eat it. And his mom was like, no, you're fucking not, and transported him back to the restaurant where her ex-husband still was with his girlfriend. Now, after dropping off her son at the restaurant, his mother actually, and this was before the attacks, right? His mother called 911 and was like, I need to tell you all this crazy shit my son is doing. Because, like, what else could she do? You know what I mean? She didn't know what else to do. And she was just like, he's talking crazy. He's acting intense. He's clearly hallucinating or delusional. He was talking about having superpowers and said that there were demons in my house. And this is before the murders even happened, but the night of. Now, back at the restaurant, some sort of fight broke out between Austin and his father, whose name was Wade. And it resulted in Wade, like, grabbing him by his shirt, like, why I oughta. You know what I mean? That kind of vibe. And I guess in response, Austin did raise his fist. Like, he was going to hit his father, but his father's girlfriend, like, de-escalated the situation. And instead, again, Austin just left. So at this point, Austin's just walking. He's walking aimlessly, and he walks for over 3 miles. During this walk, Austin removes, like, all of his clothes. So he's just walking down the street in his underwear, okay? When all of a sudden, he gets scared. He starts feeling like something's after him, like something's chasing him. He says that the dark was, like, enveloping him, and darkness was scary, and he needed to get away from the darkness, so he ran towards the light, which he believed was a safe space. And this light was the light coming from John and Michelle's open garage, and Austin was running right towards it. So the garage door is open, and Austin enters in his underwear, and just chaos ensues from there. And it ends with Austin stabbing to death both John and Michelle with items that were in their own garage, like a pair of scissors, a machete, and then a knife that Austin had on him. It was like a pocket knife that his father had bought him just the day before at a gun show. And honestly, it was even more brutal than that. It turns out that Austin also beat them pretty badly. And Austin was a big dude. He was a strong dude. He was 6 feet tall. He weighed 200 pounds. He was a football player, right? And on his football recruiting page online, I don't know sports, on the thing that you put online so you can get scouts to know you exist, he put that he could bench and squat. Bench and squat over 300 pounds. So he was a strong dude, and he had beat this couple. Just to illustrate how brutal this actually was, later after all this happened, when victims were giving their victim impact statements, right? Ivy Stevens, which was John's daughter, Michelle's stepdaughter, gave a statement where she was speaking directly to Austin. And in this quote that I'm going to read to you, she definitely shed some more light on just how brutal this actually was. She said to Austin, and I quote, "When I think of Michelle, I try to imagine how she felt when she found you staring back at her, how her breath left her body out of fear. I cannot even begin to imagine how terrified she must have been when you attacked her, beat her, stabbed her, broke her nose, knocked out her teeth, hit her head so hard into the concrete that it partially scalped her." So that's bad, right? That's horrible. And the one silver lining you can take out of this, if there is a silver lining, if you can take any silver lining out of this fucking bullshit clouded sky of bullshit, that's what I'm going to go with, is that the medical examiner who later did the autopsy said that they did both die pretty quickly. So hopefully they didn't feel pain for too long. That's really all you can hope for, because I mean, you hope that none of this happened, right? But since it did and you can't do anything about it, you just have to hope that they weren't in pain long. So now he's in the garage. They're freaking out. They're screaming, and their neighbor, 47-year-old Jeff Fisher, hears the screams and comes over to help because everybody was good friends. And he said when he got there, he just saw Michelle lying in a pool of her own blood, not moving. And he said at that point, Austin sees him and starts saying something to him along the lines of, like, "You don't want any of this. You don't want any of me." And he doesn't back down, and him and Austin start scuffling. And as a result of the scuffle, he ends up getting stabbed several times, 3 times, and he ends up needing to be treated at a hospital. That's how bad the stab wounds were. I mean, all stab wounds are bad stab wounds, right? You're probably going to end up at the hospital, and Jeff Fisher did. So anyways, Jeff leaves. He goes to his house. He calls the police, and that's what we opened on when we started this video. So police arrive, and they see that John and Austin had, like, rolled out into the driveway out of the garage in their fight. Austin has his body wrapped around John's body, and they can see that he's, taken bites out of John's face and also out of his abdomen. Now, police did everything they could to get Austin to release John. They kicked him several times in the face. They tased him. They sicked the dog on him. Austin never reacted at all to any of this. Police did everything but shoot him, and they didn't shoot him, they said, because they were afraid they'd hit John if they did, because they were wrapped around each other. Finally, when 3 or 4 deputies worked together, they were able to pry him off of John, but they noted that Austin had a lot more strength than someone you'd normally encounter would. It was reported that once he was pulled off of John, he started screaming at police like, "Fucking kill me, fucking shoot me, I deserve to die." And that once they handcuffed him, he was like grunting and making animal noises. And this is really gross. I'm going to say it now. It's fucking gross. They noted that he had chunks of flesh and hair in his mouth. Now, initially when this happened, police believed that Austin was on drugs. They believed he was on either bath salts or on something called flakka. Like, the sheriff even came out and was like, yes, this could absolutely be a case of flakka, because though he had been tested for like other drugs, like, like meth and cocaine and all that, and it had come out negative, he was still acting in such a way that they, like, what do they call it? Delirious excitement, something like that, that they believed he had to have been on something. But fucking Shyamalan twist, when the toxicology report came back, it was determined this wasn't the case. He tested negative for all drugs. flocka and others like coke and meth, that kind of thing, none of it was in his system. All they found in his system were small traces of marijuana. And the state, like, you know, the state, right? They literally sent evidence specimens to 2 different drug testing facilities on 3 different occasions, only to have negative results come back each time. So they did their due diligence on testing him to make sure he wasn't on drugs, and no drugs came back. Now, I did not know what flocka was because I do scrapbooking, not drugs, right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. But I thought maybe you don't know either, so I will now tell you what flocka is. Flocka is a designer drug. Fancy. Not fancy, I shouldn't be joking. Flocka is a designer drug that can be snorted, smoked, injected, or swallowed. And it's been seen in a number of large cases of like bizarre, uncontrollable behavior in Florida specifically. It's made from the same chemical that's used to make bath salts. And as we may know, I did know this, is that bath salts are a drug that has been found behind a bunch of really intense incidences, even in incidents where a guy, I believe he was in Florida, he chewed off another guy's face in 2012. So it totally makes sense that like they would connect that to Austin with the face chewing of it all. They also thought it was possible that drugs were involved because Austin did buy drugs shortly before the murders. Like I think a couple days before the murders, he bought a bunch of magic mushrooms. So they were like, ha, mushrooms, hallucination. Bah. But again, all of the results came back negative. And even Austin said, like, go ahead and test me. You're not going to find, did I say test? Go ahead and test me. You're not going to find any drugs in my system. But with that said, later the prosecutor did come out and say that like not all drugs show up on a drug test, like synthetic drugs don't always show up on a drug test, so that could have something to do with it. And he also noted that some of Austin's friends, like they went through his texts because obviously that's what you do. And some of his friends said some things that would lead one to believe that he was in fact doing flocka or bath salts. Like his friends said that they thought it was possible he was on it when he committed this murder. And then one of his friends, I believe his name, he went by like Cleffy, is that right? It is right. In a group chat, he said specifically of this in Austin, and I quote, "Dude, he wasn't psycho. It was the drugs. He's famous now. LOL. He got what he wanted." And I believe this notion of he's famous now, he got what he wanted, this idea came from a text that Austin had previously sent to a friend. They had like a group chat going on. And in this chat, in this group, in this message, he said, and I quote, "Why the fuck just not do what you want? Just do the craziest shit you can. I just want to be great before I die." It was also thought that perhaps this could be due to steroids because, you know, Austin was so into fitness and into working out and getting big and, you know, all of that. But I didn't see whether or not he had any steroids in his system. It said, like, I didn't see steroids referenced specifically as being excluded, though, I mean, most of his drug tests came back with no drugs, so I think that they would have mentioned that. And plus, his family said that they really didn't believe that he would have ever done steroids because though he did like to work out, he was one of those guys that was very, like, proud of being natty, you know, like a lot of gym bros are. But there are, like, a lot of gym bros who are really vocal about being natty who quite simply are just not natty. Like, they're just not. But anyways, his father was like, no, it wasn't steroids and it definitely wasn't drugs. Right from the beginning, his dad was like, I know this is mental health issues. I know for sure that he was suffering a mental health break because schizophrenia runs in my family. And he said that in the weeks leading up to the murders, his son had been acting super duper strange and that his family wanted to do something and that they had even made him an appointment to be evaluated. But the appointment was set for after when the murders took place. So it was, you know, essentially a useless appointment because of where we find ourselves now. Anyways, after being taken into custody, Austin was actually admitted to St. Mary's Medical Center instead of being arrested right away because he was in critical but stable condition. His father came out and said that Austin's liver was failing and his lungs were filling up with fluid and that he was experiencing bleeding in his esophagus. Simply, he put that, like, his son's organs were just shutting down. I guess this was happening. Well, I don't guess. This was happening because Austin had drank a bunch of chemicals that he had found in John and Michelle's garage because I guess murdering makes you thirsty. So he just drank a bunch of random chemicals and the doctor said that everything that was happening to him was a result of caustic chemical consumption, which is something I had never heard of, but apparently it's bad to drink chemicals, so don't drink chemicals. Anyways, he also was in the hospital because apparently he got a really deep cut to his right hand and it almost severed his thumb off. And it was believed, well, this injury was consistent with the knife slipping while he was stabbing either John or Michelle. Now, it took weeks for Austin to even be able to be interviewed by police because though he was quickly alert and awake in the hospital, he was unable to speak due to, his throat essentially being shredded by all the chemicals he had drank, which he wasn't supposed to be drinking. But even though he couldn't speak, his family could, and they did release a statement after the murder took place, and their statement said, and I quote, "The Harrouff family loves Austin, as they know the Stevens and Mishcon families loved John Stevens III and Michelle Mishcon. There are no words we can offer to give any real comfort for this tragic loss. There are no words we can offer that we can make up for the injuries sustained by Jeff Fisher, who is doing what we would all want good neighbors to do, which was try to help innocent people from being hurt or killed." Now, what's wild to me is that while Austin is still in the hospital, I think this happened the day before he was released, he was actually interviewed by Dr. Phil. He's in his hospital bed and they're doing it over video chat. And I always find this to be so weird when Dr. Phil interviews murderers prior to their trials. We've seen this before. If you recall, if you've seen my video on Zachary Davis, which if you haven't, you should see that video. It's actually my most viewed video, or one of my most viewed videos, and it's a very interesting case. But he too was interviewed by Dr. Phil prior to his trial, and then his, interview with Dr. Phil was shown. And it's just a really weird thing. And I guess John's family thought this was weird too. John the second, so this would have been John's father, spoke out saying that clearly Dr. Phil and his team were more interested in Austin's perspective than the families or the victims, and said that the Dr. Phil show had made no attempt to reach out to them to see if maybe they wanted to be on the show. Which I don't think was him actually wanting to be on the show. I think it was him being upset that everyone was focusing on Austin instead of, his son, his daughter-in-law, which is reasonable and which is exactly why I started out my video with talking about who they were, because they are who is most important. And his family also questioned the timing of it all because it was set to be released, the interview, just days before the grand jury was going to hear about Austin's case. Now, another thing about this that is wild is that a Florida judge actually ruled to let the interview be released prior to the trial, which I think is also weird. I guess there was a fight to suppress it, but in the end, a judge determined that it could be released to media outlets prior to the trial even taking place. But anyways, in this interview, they talked about, all the stuff you and I have talked about. They talked about drugs, and he, denied being on drugs, whether it be bath salts, flocka, steroids, any of that. He denied it wholeheartedly, and when asked by Dr. Phil what he'd like to say to his victims' families, which is just he said, and I quote, "I never imagined this would ever happen, and I am deeply sorry to the family that was affected. I hope that something like this never happens again. I never wanted consciously to do something like this, and I never planned it. I didn't want to do it." And he said this while crying. During the interview, Austin also said that he suffered from paranoia and delusions of grandeur, and he told Dr. Phil that he needed help. He said he was so sorry and had no idea why he had attacked John and Michelle. He was asked how he feels about the deaths of John and Michelle, and at that point he started to really cry and said, quote, "I feel terrible, and I really, really don't have words to explain how I feel. It's like a nightmare. It's the hardest thing I've ever gone through. I never imagined this would ever happen, and I am deeply sorry to the family. I'm sorry for their loss, and I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I'm so sorry, and I never wanted this to happen. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to put it into words. I never wanted this to happen." John and Michelle's son, John IV, saw this interview, and he was not impressed. He wasn't moved by Austin's tears, and he simply said, yeah, he's crying and he's upset now, but that's because he's going to jail, not because of what he did to my father. So now, Austin's dad was also interviewed by Dr. Phil, and I gotta be honest, when I first watched an interview from him, which was one of the first things I did, right? I felt bad for him. I did. I felt bad for his dad. As I researched further into this case, my sympathy for Austin's dad kind of went down a little bit, but during this interview, which we will get into, but during this interview, he seemed gutted. He seemed really upset. He cried a lot. He apologized to John and Michelle's families, saying that this is the biggest nightmare. He doesn't know how this could happen. He's so sorry. and said that it doesn't make any sense to him because his son is like a deeply, truly good person that would never do something like this. But I don't know. He did say some like rude things, some stuff that made me look at him a little differently when he was having conversations with just Austin, conversations like phone calls that ended up being released later, which we will get into a bit later. Actually, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just get through it now. So basically, when the victim impact statements were read later, one of Michelle's sisters was reading her victim impact statement, and she referenced these phone calls between Wade, which is Austin's father, and Austin, where his father was really like rude and disrespectful to John and Michelle, calling them those fucking people and saying not to worry that him and his son would get through this bullshit. Those fucking people and get through this bullshit. You mean get through the fact that your son murdered two innocent people? I just found that, like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, fuck this guy. You know what I mean? Like, if you're watching, I doubt you are, but, like, that's fucking rude, bro. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's gonna make people not think you're very cool, but I doubt this guy gives a fuck what I think, so. I guess he also said some things that implied that John and Michelle did something to cause Austin to do what he did, which is like, you know, not a good look. And according to the victim impact statement, I don't know where she got this and what prompted her to say this, but she also said that he was a horrible person and a racist person who hated Jewish people, and that he said and did horrible things to his own patients where he was a dentist. So I don't know where she got all that, but I thought I would tell you because that's what she said. And now we'll move on past Wade. So once Austin was released from the hospital, which was 49 days after the murders, by the way, he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as a count of attempted first-degree murder for the stabbing of Jeff Fisher, and he was also charged with burglary charges and resisting arrest. He was granted no bail on all of the charges, except for the charge for resisting an officer. He did get bail for that, and that was $5,000, which I thought was weird. I've never actually seen that happen, and I'm kind of like, why does that matter? Doesn't that seem pointless? Because let's say he pays the $5,000. He still has to like stay in jail because he didn't get bond on the other ones, right? So why? Now, something I found interesting, but others might not, but I'm going to tell you anyway because I know it. Now you have to know it. So once what Austin did like got out to the media, once it got out that he had literally like eaten human flesh, that's not funny. This is stupid. What I'm going to say is stupid. This group called the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals reached out to the prison, okay, and they requested that Austin be put on a vegan diet because of what he had done. But you guys know I'm a vegetarian, so I'm all for that. But what the fuck? Anyways, man, people were shocked by this murder. They were blown away. They couldn't believe it, the randomness of it all. Even the sheriff came out and was like, okay, normally when we come up to a scene like this, we have to like try to establish motive. That's how we work, but it seems like there was no reason for this happening. Anyways, he gets out of the hospital, he's arrested, he gets an attorney, and immediately they say that basically his defense is going to be that a mental health crisis was at play at the time of the murders. His attorney made a statement that basically said that this appeared to be an onset illness, and at least initially he didn't state whether this was coupled with any other behavior, likely referring to the drug since this was the mentality at the time. And I think he didn't want to put his foot in his mouth, but I could be wrong there. He could have been talking about something else. I'm guessing what he was talking about, because I wasn't there, and I'm not him. With that said, Austin's attorney entered him a plea of not guilty due to reason of insanity, and he actually waived his right to a jury trial as well, which meant that he would be, his fate would be determined by just a judge. Anyways, I'm now going to tell you what happened from Austin's point of view, and I want you to keep in mind that this is a very condensed version of what happened because, again, his mental health evaluation was like pages and pages long, and I did read it, but like I couldn't put it all in here. Someone, if there isn't already a podcast specifically dedicated to this case, you know, like Cold and Serial, like something specifically to one case, this should be the case for it because there's just so much to it. So this is a condensed version. But basically what he said happened is that the night of the murders, when he was out in the street, he was running from a demon-like figure. He ran to the garage of the Stevens, to the light where he thought he was safe because he was running from a demon-like figure. He actually said the reason he left the restaurant in the first place is because he was running from this demon that he had given the name Daniel. What did a Daniel do to him is what I'd like to know, because what a name, but he's running from Daniel. He claimed that in the days leading up to the murder, he felt like God was talking to him, and he felt like the spirits of dogs were a part of who he was. And I know that that seems random, but it does come into play based on what he did. Now, his memory of what happened in the garage was a little bit spotty. He said that he remembered being in the garage. He remembered looking into the left corner of the garage and seeing a machete. And he said that he remembered seeing the woman, which was Michelle, standing before him, and that she was covered in darkness, and there was a man there that was covered in white. He said that she screamed, and he had the machete, and then from there, it was all a blur. He said that he knew it had happened, but at the same time, he wasn't there. He said all he could remember was saving the dog. What dog? I don't know. But he said he remembered saving the dog, hijacking a car, and then it was all a blur. And those are things that didn't even happen. Now, after this, after he's arrested, the families had to wait way too long to get any sort of resolution. Okay, they had to wait 6 years for a conclusion to this case. It was due to a couple of reasons. There was, him being in the hospital, and then a bunch of legal BS, which can prolong things for so long, and then COVID happened. So from 2016 to 2022, they just had to sit there and wait, which is so fucked up and way too common. Things were happening during this time. I mean, there always are. Like, Michelle's family did file a civil lawsuit against him. Essentially, they wanted to try to get justice for Michelle and John, and they wanted him to pay for what he did in any way that he could. And since they couldn't, have him pay with his life, because I don't think the death penalty was even on the table in this situation. I could be wrong there. But they wanted him to have to pay with a civil judgment in case, in case of whatever. I didn't see if this was successful, though, but I saw that it was filed. Also during this time, Austin met with mental health professionals, obviously some for the defense and some for the prosecution, with the plan for these evaluations from both sides to be presented at trial, and for, one side to pick apart the other side's story and, see who came out the victor. That was the plan. So 6 years go by, and on November 28th, 2022, the families show up for what is supposed to be his trial. They have waited all this time, and they're prepared for the trial to begin and for his fate to be determined by one judge. So they get there, and this is when they learn, and this is going to blow your mind if you do not already know this case. They learn that the prosecution and the defense had decided together that he was not going to face trial, and he was not going to face jail. Instead, he was going to just be sent to a mental health facility, and he would just be there until he was deemed no longer a risk, and then he could just be released. Basically, the judge told them that both sides had agreed, unfortunately, that Austin had not formed the intent to murder Michelle and John, and that is needed. Now, the reason this happened is because mental health experts met with Austin from the defense's side and from the prosecution side. And all of them, not all of them, but most of them came to the same conclusion, that he was suffering from an acute psychotic break at the time that the murders were committed, and that he did not know right from wrong at the time that he killed Michelle and John. And one of the prosecution's medical experts also did like a brain test on him. Okay. And in doing this test, they found that he was not faking or exaggerating his illness. Austin was proven to be suffering from an acute psychotic episode where he believed he was half dog and half man for several reasons. One of which was the fact that Austin continued attacking his victims despite being tased and kicked several times in the face. And the defense's expert also stated that they believed that Austin was suffering from clinically canthropy, which involves a person believing that they are a dog. Now, the prosecution did end up hiring another mental health expert. Yeah. And this person evaluated Austin and actually determined that he was sane and that he had been under some sort of drug when he committed the murders, but it was a drug that did not show up on, the drug screening at the time. But this doctor didn't actually meet with Austin at the time, so it was just kind of him looking at everything after the fact and coming to that conclusion. And this person ended up being withdrawn anyway due to serious health problems, so this person's testimony wasn't even used. Now, obviously, John and Michelle's families were really unhappy to hear this, as I'm sure. Like, how could they not be? And I guess one of Michelle's sisters heard that Austin could be released in as little as 6 to 12 months if he's deemed mentally safe to be released. But it has been said that it's more likely that he'll be in there a very long time, if not his entire life. And some expert came out and said that there's a good chance he'll never be released, just strictly due to the notoriety of the case. Anyways, despite the idea that he could be in there for a long time, this didn't bring her family or her sister comfort. She said that essentially the court was leaving the doors open for a double murderer to just walk right through and be free. And she said that this decision brought 4 little words to her mind: white, rich boy, justice. And Michelle's other sister, Jody, was just like, wow, like, I had no idea that you could kill 2 people and then not even go to trial or have to go to jail. That's news to me, and that shit is fucking wild. They were really upset, and they were reasonably upset. They felt like the prosecution and the court, like, they felt like justice wasn't on their side. They felt like the prosecution was failing them by not even trying. And the prosecutor did come out and was like, listen, if you need somebody to be a punching bag, I will take that responsibility. I will be that person. But I did everything I could. And the evidence just is not there. And he was like, I'm not happy about this either. This is not the result I wanted either, but I can't make up facts, and I didn't make the law. This prosecutor, by the way, his name's Brandon White, I believe. He was really vocal about being displeased with the way things turned out in this case, and actually said he wanted to make some legislation changes because of the outcome of Austin's case specifically. He said that he wanted to make something positive out of something so horrific. And first, he wanted to see what he could do to change the law in Florida regarding insanity and guilt. Because apparently in Florida, if you're insane, you cannot be guilty, right? Which essentially gets you off completely. And he believes that you're basically leaving the decision of whether or not this person will go to jail or walk free up to paid experts and psychologists, when that's not even a hard science. And basically, you could pay an expert witness or a psychologist to say whatever you want. Like, you can shop around to find somebody who's going to say what you want them to say, so he doesn't feel like they should be like the final authority. He basically wants there to be something like a law that says you are insane, but you are still guilty. So yes, you could have been mentally insane at the time that you did this, but you still have to serve some time for committing the crimes that you commit. He also wants to adjust something called the voluntary intoxication law, because I guess the way the law is now, it only takes into account what somebody does while they are actively intoxicated, and not the action someone might take while experiencing the psychological impacts from withdrawal or long-term drug use. Because basically what he was saying is that Austin had a drug problem, right? The entire year before the murders, he had a serious drug problem, and this was documented through texts with friends and like his writings and things like that. And right before the murders, he just completely stopped cold turkey. And the prosecutor basically believes that the withdrawal from him doing drugs, and then just stopping sent him into the psychosis, which caused him to murder John and Michelle. And he believes he should be held accountable for that. So he had the plan. He said he was going to reach out to lawmakers to see if they could, support the legislation that he was going to push. But this was in like the end of 2022, because I mean, this just happened in November of 2022. So I'm curious to see how all of this does play out, and if he really is going to do the things he says he's going to do, and if he is going to do it, if it's going to be successful. Now, Austin, his parents, his defense team, they say that drugs had nothing to do with it. They say that he was simply mentally ill at the time that he killed John and Michelle, and that was that on that. But Michelle's family, and I believe John's family as well, but Michelle's family I saw more reports from, do not believe that. They believe that he was a coddled drug addict who was completely aware of what he was doing. Michelle's sister Cindy talked about this, his drug issue, at length during her victim impact statement. She read aloud his text exchanges, talking about his drinking, his drug use, listing the drugs as cocaine, prescription pills, mushrooms, methamphetamines, codeine, Adderall, and heroin. She talked about his blackouts and talked about him feeling crazy. He told a friend in these texts that he thought he was crazy. Like, he told a friend in his text, like, oh, I think I'm crazy, but I thought I was crazy, but actually I'm not. It's just the drugs messing with my head. So she's like, he said it. He said it. He said it. So why are we here? So they believe that he is not crazy, and they believe that his family doesn't really believe that he's crazy either. I get the vibe that Michelle's family believes that Austin's family sort of lied for him a little bit and made it seem like he was acting crazy longer than he actually was, because their evidence to this was like, hey, if you thought your son was suffering from such a mental health issue that you were going to set him up a doctor's appointment to get him help, then why would you take him to a gun show the day before he murdered my sister and buy him a knife? The math ain't mathin', my guy. This doesn't make sense. People really spoke passionately during their victim impact statements. Like, so many of them that I read, I was just like, damn. Like, you can feel it. You can feel everything. This girl, Haley, I couldn't see who Haley was or how she was related to the victims, but this girl, Haley, had some strong words. She said to Austin, and I quote, "I hope you never find happiness for the rest of your life. And if you ever have the courage to do something, the bravest act would be for you to kill yourself. And everyone would be better off because of it." Now, Ivy Stevens also spoke out, and this was John's daughter, Michelle's stepdaughter. I guess she lived with them for a long time. I think I read that she lived with them for like 10 years and had just moved out weeks before the murders. And she, in her victim impact statement, spoke at length about the loss and the trauma. And I felt like her victim impact statement was very powerful. So I'm going to read a little portion of it here because I think it's important so you can really see how things like this affect the people who loved victims of murder. You know what I mean? Like, humanize these people. Remember, it's not just a story. Know that this was somebody's something, somebody's most important person, you know? So Ivy Stevens said to Austin, and I quote, "This is what wakes me up in the middle of the night as I lay in bed for hours picturing the way that they died. You have not only destroyed the memory of them for me, but you have caused me to live in a constant state of fear, not only for myself, but for my family. You are the reason I check all my doors at night. The reason I think someone is going to murder my children. The reason I think someone is waiting inside my house to stab me to death when I get home every day. You are the reason I think life is disposable and can be taken away in an instant. You are the reason I no longer have a father and a second mother. Why my two beautiful boys will never have grandparents. I feel so terrible for them, that they will never get to experience the love that my father and Michelle could have given them, the memories that could have been made with them, and the lessons they could have learned from them." She then went on to say that she hopes that one day she can remember them without thinking of their horrible murders and instead remember them for who they were for her, but she doesn't think that'll ever be possible, which I don't see how it could ever be possible either. I know the people that I've lost in my life, when I think back, I think of the way that they died much more than I think of who they were before that. And that's sad, but it's true. When you lose somebody to violence, or suddenly and tragically, that is what you remember. And that is on him. The judge seemed to be as sympathetic and empathetic as a judge can be, especially given the situation they were in. They said, he, I think it was a guy, doesn't matter. The judge said that no one was losing sight of the real tragedy here, and that was the loss of John and Michelle. And he wanted to make it clear that, like, that was the most important thing, but that legally speaking, both sides agreed that Austin was not guilty due to the reason of insanity. Like, he couldn't do anything about it. He's like, I'm sorry, but this is how it is, essentially. So I'm very curious. Like, I'm so curious to see what you guys think, because I feel like some cases I do, I'm like, most cases I do, I'm like, we're all going to feel one way. This is a case that I feel like could be very polarizing. And even now, after reading everything, I don't even know where I stand. It definitely seems like he had a drug problem. And I will say, I don't know firsthand, but I know secondhand, like very close, like 1 degree away from this person. I know that people can be totally normal, seem like nothing is wrong for years, for their whole lives, seem like nothing is wrong mentally, do intense drugs, and get themselves into a point where they're now into the depths of schizophrenia, where they've totally ruined their lives from drug-induced schizophrenia. That does happen. His Google searches and his journal entries did make it seem like something was wrong. He searched things like, how do I know if I'm crazy? Schizophrenia. How do I reach out to Oprah for help? And in his journal, he wrote about how he was divine and how he was turning into a centaur. He often wrote about his declining mental health, and just hours before the murders, he wrote, quote, "I wish to be normal, just a normal guy. Not too nice, not too mean. But I can still run because I can't be tamed." Which is already like, what? It goes from, the sentence doesn't make sense. And then he followed up this with saying, quote, "Centaur, you are awakened. Don't let them kill you." So, was he going through a mental health crisis? Was he on some drug that didn't show up on his screening? Or was he going through a mental health crisis that was induced by his habitual drug use? That's really the question here. But I want to end this video with something a little bit more positive, something that is more victim focused, because I feel like that is what is lost in these sorts of cases often. That's the most important thing. So John's son, John IV, he had to clean out his father's home after his father died, which must have been a completely traumatizing experience. I cannot even imagine it. But while he was doing so, he found a poem that his father wrote when he was a boy. I guess his dad, because remember, he was a sensitive guy, loved nature, loved life. He was a poet. And so his son found a poem that he'd written when he was young. And I want to read that poem because I think that it is beautiful and heart-wrenching, and I think it's a really good way to end off this video. So his father wrote, and I quote, "Trees are the earth's way of telling people how much they love them, and in return, we cut them down. Trees giving off flowers is really laughter, or an expression of laughter, but they die. So when someone said that all good things must come to an end, it was true." And with that poem that truly just hit me in the heart, that, my friends, is the story of the murders of John and Michelle Stevens at the hands of Austin Harrouff. I hope that you found this case to be interesting and informative, and I hope I gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for remembering John and Michelle with me today, because that really is the most important thing. But now that I've given you all of the information, I want to revisit the question or questions of the day now that now that you can have a more informed opinion. And these were the questions. What do you believe was going on with Austin at the time that he committed his murders? Was he going through a psychotic break? Was he tripping on a drug that could not be detected? Or was he going through a psychotic break because of his prolonged drug use? And with that, do you believe that his sentence was just? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. But anyways, guys, that is the video. So before you leave, don't forget to let me know any case, leave me in the comments any case you'd like to see me cover in the future. As you know, I have a long list of cases, and anytime you leave a suggestion, I put your name next to it so I can give you a shout out if you cover it, if I cover it, if you cover it, if we cover it. I love covering cases that you guys suggest because they're often cases that need more coverage or that I haven't heard of. And I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste, otherwise you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my merch store and a link to my membership where you can get early access to non-sponsored videos, occasional live streams, things like that. I want to say one more thank you to Ana Luisa Jewelry for partnering with me on today's video. And of course, a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. And with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.